Impact Wrestling Media Teleconference. This is Ross Foreman. Special guest this week is none other than Executive Vice President Don Callis. Don, how you doing today?
Doing great, man. Good to be here.
All right. Well, Don, lots going on in Impact these days. Let me change one thing on the settings, and we'll get going here in about 2 seconds here.
All right.
Muted.
All right. Well, Don, as I was saying, lots going on. Let me just open it up for you. Impact tomorrow night. What's going on with you, and where are we at?
I'm pretty excited about the show tomorrow. I mean, Scott Steiner's going to be back in action on the show. We've got a tremendous all-star tag team match as our main event with Phantasma and Pentagon against Matt Sydal and Austin Aries. Really, really excited. We know that we're leading up to Under Pressure on Thursday, May 31st with Pentagon versus Austin Aries in that rematch. So a lot of exciting things, I think, building on what we've been doing and really looking forward to as well the street fight between Eddie Edwards and Sami Callihan that'll take place courtesy of House of Hardcore.
And obviously that's a very personal topic for you with all that's going on with Sami Callihan, who's clearly goes by his own rule book these days.
Yeah, I mean, listen, to me, it's not a lot different. I like to make coaching analogies, and to me, it's if you coached the Chicago Bulls back in the day, and you had Dennis Rodman on your team. I mean, the upside was the production on the court, and the downside was all of the other issues you had to deal with. But there are issues that come along with the package, and sometimes those are issues that you have to protect the talent from themselves, so to speak, and knock any of our talents, including Sami, which may surprise people. But I would just say, listen, I mean, Sami calls himself the Draw. The numbers bear that out. He's one of the more talked about guys in the business. Whatever the reason is, people can debate that. But Sami is a guy who, as a corporate person, as someone who's responsible for kind of the product we put out there and the talent, Sami is a guy who sometimes is his own worst enemy by either, what he says, things that come out of his mouth, or the things that he does. If he weren't the talent that he is, we'd be having a very different conversation about Sami Callihan. But the reality is that he delivers numbers, and the reality is that he creates a lot of buzz. And the downside is you've got to manage him because left to his own devices, I think he's certainly shown in the past that as good a performer as he is, that he's not a guy who has good impulse control. He's not a guy who is going to make necessarily the smart decisions. And I think that personal issues aside, I think Sami has two things that we all need to work with him on as a talent. One is, not being unsafe in the ring. And I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about what happened in Toronto to me. But, I will say there were things that happened that day that, were not certainly in anyone's prior understanding. Let's just put it that way. So I think that, you have to be a competitor that people want to do business with. You can be a big draw, but if no one wants to work with you, you have a problem. And the other thing, which I think is hand in glove with that frankly, is a business person, because ultimately this is a business, and business people comport themselves in a certain way. And I think that you can be as talented as you want, but at some point there's a tipping point where a corporation or an office is going to look at you and say, maybe the risk outweighs the benefit. So we don't ever want to get to that point with Sami or any of our talents. So we need to work with him. And that's partially what I had been trying to do the last few months. And some people see help as being told what to do, and they don't like it. And that's probably the nicest thing I can say about Sami in that situation at this point.
Well, Don, before we move on to media questions, we do want to ask, how are you doing health-wise?
You know, I mean, I'm all right. I mean, I'm not, again, without kind of breaking down the fourth wall here, I mean, I'm not, I come from an era in wrestling where things were done a certain way, and there were never intended to be what I'll call bad surprises or forks in the road taken in a given segment or situation. And my issue with Sammy is more that, you know, we've been trying to make him a safer person. And, you know, what happened with me was the opposite of that. So I am more concerned about what I would call, you know, the fact that I was not successful in trying to bring Sammy around. Much more bothered by that than the physical stuff. The physical stuff is what it is. And I'm a 49-year-old guy who, you know, isn't used to being bumped around or potatoed or whatever you want to call it. And I have no desire to do that. And so, but that is what it is. And I used to be a wrestler way back in the day. It's not the first time someone's kicked my ass. And, you know, again, I'm kept up at night as much or more with the idea of how do I get through to this talent who clearly, you know, my comment to Sammy, if he were sitting here, would be, you know, you've been doing things your way your whole career. How's that worked out for you? You've probably been fired from everywhere you've ever worked. You know, I mean, I work in New Japan Pro Wrestling, and Sammy is thought of as a wild card and unpredictable there. You know, he hurt a bunch of guys in the dressing room there. That wasn't widely reported, but that happened. You know, he is, you know, he's a risky guy, and if he weren't so talented, no one would probably use him, but they do, and he is, to a certain extent, a ticking time bomb every time he's booked. And so I do lose a lot of sleep over, you know, what I see as part of my job and all of our jobs here is to make talent better. And with Sammy, I don't think we're going to make him a better wrestler because he's a great wrestler. We're not going to help Sammy with his personality because he has a really exciting personality and vibe about him. Where we have to help Sammy is the stuff I've talked about. And it seems like nothing we've done so far has gotten through to Sammy Callahan, which is unfortunate.
Well, Don, obviously we could probably spend a full hour talking about Sammy, as no doubt Sammy would want us to do for the full hour. But lots to talk about Impact Wrestling. We have a room full of media waiting to talk to you. So we're going to open up for media questions at this point. Media, as always, please limit it to one question and one question so we can get through everybody's question. And when you call in, please identify yourself and your media outlet. And as always, to get in queue for the questions with Don, hit *6.
Q&A session has started. To ask your question, please press *6.
Hi there, Don. It's Adam from V2 Wrestling and the Impact Lounge here. Good evening to you.
Hey.
Let me first of all start off by thanking you for you and Scott revitalizing the product and giving us Impact fans some hope for the future. But my question is more to do with social media, actually. And this might be more of a question for Josh, but hopefully you can answer it as well. One of the Twitch experience I've found is that because it's quite moderated, heavily moderated for fans on there, it's a much more enjoyable experience. Do you think that you'll extend that to some of your other social media platforms like Facebook and those kind of things, just to give people who are fans of the product a better experience when, interacting with the wrestlers?
Well, it's thanks for the question. And it's, in some respects, I've said before, I feel like I've been in a time capsule and someone kind of woke me up or dug me up after 12 or 13 years of being away, because there are many things about the wrestling business that changed during that period of time when I wasn't involved in it or following as closely. And one of the things is the idea of fan interaction, which I'm all for, by the way. And I've told the story before. When I came up in the business, it was all about avoiding the fans in a sense. We looked a certain way, and the reality, the first guy who trained me said the reason that you do lift weights, you tan, you have long hair, and you have fancy robes is you don't want to look like the fans. The fans don't want you to look like the fans. And if a fan came up, especially if you were a heel and tried to talk to you, you would blow them off. And sometimes you'd be rude to get your heel gimmick over. And that was standard practice. Now it's a total 180. It's like not only are we all expected to interact with the fans on a one-on-one basis, take selfies, all that stuff, but now the fans have all these different platforms and avenues and lanes where they can almost get involved in the product, get involved in the angle, give their instant feedback. And we all know that's social media. I actually think that's super cool, and I don't pretend to be a social media expert, but I encourage any involvement that we have, whether it's with Twitch or other platforms, that engage the fans. I was able to do a question and answer on Reddit one day, and got to kind of interact directly with fans. Interacting on these calls is also great. I was on the chat room in Twitch during one of our events, and I think my sign-in name is Impact Pencil or something like that. A little nod to Paul Heyman there, but I got to kind of start commenting back and forth with what people were seeing in real time. So I think, yes, we would love to see more of that, and I think that there hopefully will be more of that to come because we love to have that interaction.
Thanks, Don.
Cheers.
Hi, Don. It's Chris Glassman from Breaking the Glorious.
Hi.
I really enjoyed your Cyrus the Virus character back in the day. Would you ever consider portraying a heel authority figure in that future?
I guess, and I've kind of taken some heat from a couple of news sources this last week of people throwing out the quote that I made when I started here, because of course I got asked that question because, I was probably the second person in wrestling to do that sort of gimmick, Vince being the first and the best. And then when I was in ACW, and I told the story when I went to TNA, what was then TNA in 2003, and they asked me to be the authority figure there, the director of authority. My initial comment was, authority figures are overdone. We shouldn't do it, but they asked me to do it, and I did it. And I made the comment that, now 15 years later, 16 years later, people are still doing authority figures, so no, I won't do it. Some people have mistaken my segment this past week, or the footage of what happened between me and Sammy, to mean that Don Callis is now going to be the on-air authority figure. And I can tell you that there are no plans for that. That is not happening. Other than doing my commentary work with Josh Matthews, I am not going to be appearing on the broadcast. And certainly there's always people, especially if they've seen what was done before in ECW or whatever, who go, yeah, but why wouldn't you do it? That would be great, etc. I don't think I have the time to commit to doing it properly. B, I genuinely don't believe that the authority figure thing is a way to go. Could there be different twists on that, which don't involve myself or Scott being on camera? Hey, I'll leave the door open and we'll see where creatively we go. But for those that kind of looked at what happened last week and me throwing in the towel during Sammy and Eddie's match at WrestleCon as harbinger of me becoming an on-screen character and coming out there cutting promos and firing people or whatever, that is not happening. And so for those that wrote about that you've got that part of it wrong, and I'll leave the on-screen money drawing to the performers.
Thank you.
This is Ian Carey from SEScoops.com. Don, I hope you're on the mend physically. Just wondering if the Lucha Underground stars are going to be continuing on Impact after season 4 of Lucha Underground begins airing, and if not, do you have any thoughts you can discuss regarding how you plan to replace the departing talents?
So just with respect to the Lucha Underground relationship, I think that's been one of the more exciting stories in the wrestling business the last 3 months. Our show at WrestleCon during Mania Week, the LU versus Impact or Impact versus LU show was a legitimate sellout. It was one of the most buzzworthy things. I mean, in a universe where, you know, DC versus Marvel and all that stuff is cool, I think people love stuff like this. I also think that us and LU doing this is symptomatic of what's going on in the wrestling business, where we are, I think, as a company, more than any other company out there the last 6 months or 5 months, we have broken the traditional old school wrestling paradigms of you only work with who you work with, and it's yourself and maybe 1 or 2 partners, and you don't let your talent do this, and you own the talent. We've broken all those things down. We are working, I won't say we're working with everyone, because there's people out there we're not working with, but it's not because we don't want to, it's because we haven't got there yet. So, you know, we're doing some stuff with House of Hardcore, Tommy Dreamer, we're doing stuff with LU, AAA, you know, so we are very open to that. And I think that not just LU, but working with other people as well, but that's been just a wonderful relationship. It's a product that I had liked a lot and followed before we got into the relationship. So I hope that continues. And in terms of departing talent, I mean, you know, of course there had been a tremendous amount of negativity towards the brand the last year before I got here, before Scott and I took this thing over with Ed. There'd been a tremendous amount of negativity. And so that narrative becomes ingrained in people's thought processes. And I think that, you know, sometimes it's like we're waiting for the other shoe to drop as the media going, okay, they're doing good now, but we know this is still TNA, which it's not. But, you know, we've seen this movie for 12 years. When's something bad going to happen? So, and it hasn't. And, you know, people will say, though, like, what about Bobby Lashley? What about this? What about that guy's leaving? And what I always say to that is, first of all, if you were a general manager and you took over a hockey team, some talent's going to leave and new talent's going to come in. And that's the reality of professional sports. And, you know, people will say, well, EC3 left, but they don't follow up with saying, but Brian Cage came in, but Austin Aries came in. So it's not like these talents have left. First off, it's not always of their own volition. Sometimes it's a mutual discussion. Well, you know, maybe it is best for both sides to move on to a new place or new territory. But from our perspective, you know, for every EC3 we've lost, we've brought in a Brian Cage. You know, we brought in a Sue Young. Some of the talent, Austin Aries, Pentagon, Phoenix, some of the top talents, most buzzworthy talents out there. So for the talent that's left, we wish them all the best. Those guys, it was great for me to get to work with EC3 and Bobby Lashley. Great guys, real professional dudes, and wish them all the best. And, you know, we're moving on with our kind of group of performers that we're happy with. And as with any sports roster, that roster is going to be evergreen. It's going to be changing, but we think surprises that are good for the fans will be continuing to come.
Hey, Don, this is Riju from Sportskeeda in India. How are you doing today?
Hi. I'm awesome.
Hey, man. Awesome. My question is, it was recently announced on social media that Rich Swann would be coming to Impact Wrestling. Could you shed more light on this, and how did this whole thing come about?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? My cell phone just cut out a little bit.
It was recently announced that Rich Swann would be headed to Impact Wrestling for the next round of taping. Could you shed more light on this, and how did this whole association come about?
You know, I think that Rich is a guy who has resurfaced on kind of the indie scene out there and working for a bunch of different promotions. As you probably know, His wife works for us and was an advocate for him coming in. So he'll be at our next set of tapings, and he's going to get an opportunity in the same way that other talent that comes in gets an opportunity to show what they could do.
Hi, Don. This is Nick Hausman with WrestleZone.com. How are you doing today?
Hey, man. Good.
Good. I just wanted to ask, you guys have been working so well with so many promotions. Obviously, the big All-In event did 10,000 tickets in like half an hour this past weekend. They've been working with Ring of Honor and New Japan, and now NWA as well. Have you guys talked with Ring of Honor, New Japan, or even the All-In crew about doing anything with those parties?
There's no official, no official discussions. I mean, certainly, I consider Cody a friend and really a great turnaround story in terms of where he's come as a performer in the last year or so. And the Bucks, of course, I'm very close with through Kenny Omega. So I was just ecstatic for those guys to be able to move that amount of tickets, which is incredible, frankly. And to do it in 30 minutes or whatever the actual time was is awesome. So I think that arrangement is a great example of something that I and Ed and Scott have been speaking about for a few months, which is we really are the last year or so, maybe year and a half, seeing a sea change in where professional wrestling is at vis-a-vis the independent wrestler. The independent wrestler, to an extent, greater extent than I think that I can ever remember in the business, the independent wrestler now has control over his own destiny and has options and has some power. And that's partially due to social media and partially due to people like Cody and the Bucks taking risks on things like All In and making that a kind of destination in people's minds for, hey, we're not only going to see a wrestling show, we're going to send a message to the wrestling world that, hey, this can happen, at this level. So I think it's what happened with All In is indicative of where the wrestling business is at with respect to the boys. And that also is reflected, I think, in our attitudes around wrestler IP and things like that. It's a different business than it was 10 years ago.
Don, we're going to go to an email question from Chad Henderson, who writes in, who do you see as a future potential face of Impact Wrestling?
Wow. I mean, it's a good problem to have that I can't just blurt out who it is, because I think that I like our roster so much right now that I think there's a lot of answers to that question. I think obviously Austin Aries is the type of guy you can build a promotion around, a kind of a Nick Bockwinkel-esque kind of a performer, very cerebral, great representative. Then on the other side, you've got a guy like Moose who, people absolutely love everywhere he goes. He's a legitimate big time athlete, 6'5", 270, former offensive lineman. Everyone knows his pedigree and has kind of, reached the apex of the football world in the NFL. And then in a very short space of time, adapted to pro wrestling, probably one of the great transitions from football to wrestling. I'd have to go back to my old days watching AWA and Russ Francis, the tight end of the New England Patriots, who used to wrestle in the off season because his dad, Ed Francis, at one point ran the Hawaii territory. So Moose is incredible. And I think that's a guy who, potentially is a guy who could be a flagship. But then I'll throw it out there. I mean, Sami Callihan. I mean, aside from the fact that Sami is all of the things that I said, he is a great wrestler who doesn't back down, who's full speed ahead, and who's a fascinating character. I mean, people remember guys like Raven back in the day in ECW, and it's like that complex character that is fundamentally flawed and imperfect, but also you can't take your eyes off him. So a guy like that, Eddie Edwards, I mean, if we can get Eddie thinking about something other than Sami, I think Eddie would be a good face of the company. Frankly, Rosemary, on the knockout side, Sue Young even, I mean, people are talking about her. So I think there's a lot of people. Brian Cage is someone who people are very excited about. I mean, so there's just it would be hard for me to pick. I mean, I think there's probably 8 or 9 people, maybe 10 if I include the knockouts as I would, that I could say I'd be very comfortable with those people, you know, being at the head of the line and kind of being the flagship.
Hey, Don.
Hey.
This is a Dick Freer, Ego Total from Israel. How are you doing?
Hey, man. How are you?
I'm good, man. You've been talking about your partnership with other promotions, and the wrestling scene in Israel has been on a rising over the past few years. The wrestler Tomer Shalom over Destiny Wrestling at Canada, and we got the Israeli Wrestling League that's been hosting a few of Impact wrestlers over the past few years, like Robbie E., Matt Seidel, Devon Eriks. And I was wondering if Israel is one of your targets for partnerships in the future.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think one of the things that's unique about Impact is that we really are a global brand. Of other companies in wrestling just are not, and that's not meant as a knock. It's just positioning where we're at. I mean, we are not a company that only, you know, we're not only doing our TV here. We're in a lot of countries globally. You know, the first step is always to expose fans in great places like Israel to the product, and then, you know, you hope that, you know, you can get that fan engagement, and hopefully at one point, you know, you get to do a tour and you get to visit the market. So, you know, Israel, I think, has, and I think you alluded to it, a long history with professional wrestling that might surprise people in terms of the popularity of the Von Erich family in Israel in the 80s. I've, you know, certainly heard all the stories about Kevin and Kerry Von Erich being when they landed in Tel Aviv many years ago. I think that, you know, it's when people have those memories that are kind of downloaded into their culture and into their brains, then it always makes it an appealing market to access. So, love to see us do something in Israel in the future, and I'm hopefully be able to talk to you soon when we're in market at some point, hopefully, and look forward to working towards a goal like that, because boy, that'd be pretty cool.
A wrestler like Tomer Shalom or the Impact rosters now these days?
You know, I'm not as familiar as I would like to be with that talent, so it'd be difficult for me to say, but certainly, you know, we'll always have our eyes open and looking for the new exciting talent to put out there.
Okay, man. Thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
Hey, Don, Ryan Bowman from thegorillaposition.com. Over the years, you know, you were always mentioned as a potential creative person for a lot of companies and respected for your wrestling IQ, but you also had other opportunities because of your business background. So my question is, what made Impact the right opportunity for you, and how has it measured up to your expectations when you came back?
You know, I think just, you know, to use an overused term, I mean, I think the stars were just aligned. I was ready to start to think about doing something different. I had been very successful doing what I'd been doing for about 12 or 13 years outside of wrestling, and it was just kind of like a progression. I mean, I've talked about it, you know, the whole Chris Jericho thing. I mean, I wasn't following the business at all. Chris brought us to Madison Square Garden, myself, Lance Storm, and Dr. Luther, Lenny St. Clair. And so all of a sudden now, for the first time in a million years, I'm at a wrestling show in the Garden, hanging out with Jericho and my friends, and it's like, wow, I really miss these guys. The Garden for me was my debut for Vince, was in the Garden in '97, and then there I was back with Chris. That didn't make me want to get back in the business, but it did get Chris and I talking a lot more. And then that led to Chris offering me the podcast, Killing the Town, which I would end up doing with Lance. And at that point, again, I still was really, I need to get back in the business full time. It was more, well, this is cool. I'm having fun talking wrestling with my buddy Lance, which we used to do on the phone all the time. And maybe I can monetize some of my my historical wrestling knowledge through the podcast as just an extra revenue stream. That then led another star in alignment. That led to me doing a podcast interview with Kenny Omega. Kenny's uncle, the Golden Sheik, helped train me. He was a wrestler in Winnipeg. I gave Kenny his first break on my wrestling shows in Winnipeg in like 2000, I want to say, or 01, when I was a promoter. So we had that connective tissue. Interviewed Kenny for the pod. 2 weeks later, Kenny told me he was looking to try to get me to New Japan to do the commentary. Thought, well, it's not a full-time thing. I can go there once a month, use my vacation at work, and go do my thing. And again, thinking of it as a part-time thing. And in the meantime, I mean, Leonard Asper, who is an incredibly well-known person and businessman, and his family as well, in my hometown of Winnipeg, had purchased, through Anthem, had purchased Impact Wrestling. So that kind of got on my radar. Well, isn't this interesting? And really over the course of like a month, I would say it kind of went from Scott and I having some phone discussions to us having a meeting and me going, holy cow, I think, like, you know, in that scenario, I think you look at reasons why you wouldn't do it. And I was having a real hard time finding any reasons that I wouldn't do it. And I mean, I've always been in my life big goal driven. And so this to me seemed like a pretty big leap to get back in the business and to look at turning the company around from where it was. And we've been very fortunate that Anthem are great partners and very supportive. And it's not something that if a year ago you had told me this is what I'd be doing, I would have laughed and said, yeah, right. But it literally just, I mean, for those that believe in things are supposed to happen a certain way, I mean, I guess maybe you would say that about this situation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Don Lewis here from the Tap That Wrestling Podcast Network. How you doing today?
Hey, man. Doing all right.
That's good. Good to hear. I've got a question. I'm just wondering what your thoughts would be in making the Xplosion TV show possibly a showcase for X Division wrestlers with matches featuring new young talent.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we try to feature newer, different talent on Xplosion from time to time. I don't like the idea of kind of segregating the X Division talent on their own show. I think sometimes that could be viewed through the lens of, well, these guys are not at the same level as the people on the main show. So I don't know that that's something that we would consider doing. You know, I think I was here in 02, 03 or 03, 04 when the X Division was kind of the talk of the wrestling world in some circles. And I think now, you know, we have a world where we have an X Division. And then I think the question is, you know, what's X Division? And it's not something I'm going to actively reveal on a media call, but I will say that I don't see Xplosion being turned into an X Division show. I think those are some of the best young athletes in the business. I think we want to give them the top platform to show what they can do.
Okay, thank you very much, Don.
Cheers.
Hey, Don, it's Mike Hill from ProWrestling.com. How you doing today?
Hey, man, how are you?
I'm good. First of all, as a longtime New Japan fan, I just wanted to say thank you for the awesome work you do with Kevin Kelly in New Japan. And I was just kind of wondering, with you kind of working there first and then sort of getting this Impact Wrestling gig, was there any pushback from either side as to, you know, when you're talking with Impact, you know, can I keep doing the New Japan thing, and talking with New Japan, can I keep, you know, is there any pushback from either side, or how's that relationship been kind of going between two companies?
You know, I think good. I mean, I think that, you know, I go back to the Impact kind of concept that Ed Nordum is championed and Scott and I have been a part of, which is, you know, we want to be flexible about talent and where they work and having partnerships. So I think that, you know, if we had a problem with me having a relationship with New Japan, that would that would go against kind of the policy that we've instated, which is we're open to working with people. So no, there was never an issue with that. I certainly love my time in Japan. I've been there, oh God, over 20 times, I guess, in the last year and a half. And, working with Kevin's great, and I love working with Josh as well. And it's a challenge for me because it's like, you know, I'm not a cookie cutter color commentator. I mean, I adapt to my environment. So I think I would be doing fans a disservice if you saw the same Don Callis commentating with Kevin Kelly as you do with Josh, or the reverse. So it's really a great color commentary was one of the jobs I loved in wrestling, because it was really about getting the boys over, getting the talent over, and you know, getting to do that job for New Japan and for Impact has been fantastic. And you know, I have, like, when I'm obviously, Impact keeps me busy. I mean, it's not a 40-hour work week. It's all the time. It's 24/7. And you know, sometimes when I'm in Japan and I can just be at the New Japan show in the back, talking to Kenny, talking to Cody, talking to Gorillas of Destiny, it almost feels like you're in the locker room and you're part of the crew, which is, you know, as a former performer, is something I miss. So I do enjoy that, you know, those 1 or 2 days a month that I'm in Japan. And it obviously, you know, it's led to a lot of other stuff. I mean, I had not done color commentary since basically ECW Japan last year. So it's been a great ride, and, you know, working with Kevin's been great. I had a great chat with Jim Ross at our LA show in Long Beach, Strong Style Evolved. And I told JR that I certainly hope that he and I would get to work together sometime in the future. We had worked together a few times in WWF at the time. And so, you know, that's something you may see down the line, is Jim Ross and Don Callis calling something. I don't know, but certainly I'm open to it. And I think as a management team, we're real open to working with everyone.
All right. Thanks, man.
Whoops. Sorry, Mike. I cut you off a drop early there. Don, we're going to go to a email question. Post Data OK writes in, what is the chance of Impact moving the weekly show to different cities?
To different, oh, you mean the tapings?
Yes.
You know, I think that, you know, we've been saying all along, Scott and myself, that, you know, we're not, you know, I think at some point people have said, well, you know, are you guys just going to be in Orlando? And then other people thought, oh, this is a Canadian company. It's run by 3 Canadian guys, owned by a Canadian guy. Is it just going to be a Canadian company? And I keep saying, no. We are going to be taking our product and our performers everywhere as we move forward. And having said all of that, you know, we live in a society where everyone wants everything yesterday, and you know, we are turning around a company, and we are making strides to that effect. But as I've said before, not everything happens overnight. Some things take time, and so I think as we talk in months that are going to follow, I think people will be pretty comfortable with some of the places that we are, and we'll continue to evolve that over our long-term plan.
Hi, Don. This is Stephanie for Steel Chair Magazine in UK.
Hey, how are you? I enjoyed our interview. People actually thought I could speak French after I talked to you, and I'm a little rusty. Comment ça va?
Ça va très bien. Bon, we're going to come back to English language. But, so everyone now thinks you're speaking French.
Well, I like to say I know enough to order a drink or get slapped, one of the two. I'm not sure.
My question was about Redemption. The pay-per-view couldn't have a better name, because it was a great pay-per-view, and a great way to say the company was great. And if you read the paper I did on it, The Redemption of Impact, you know what I thought about. But what I wanted to ask you is, what was your state of mind? Because this pay-per-view was the first under this new regime, if I can say it like that. And so what was your state of mind, Scott, and the creative coming to this pay-per-view? Merci beaucoup.
Bienvenue. So I think that, we were all aware that this was going to be the first pay-per-view that we would be judged by. This was the one where we were all in place and we had a couple of months to kind of lead into it. So, I think that we have a vision for Impact Wrestling as a management team, and as a creative team, we look for ways to execute on that vision. And so I think, when you have that overwhelming vision for the company, then I think, everything flows from that. So what kind of company do we want to be? What kind of performers do we want to have out there? What kind of stories do we want to tell? And from a creative perspective and a performance perspective, redemption was a part of that vision. And I think, overwhelmingly, as you said, positive feedback. And so we're happy about that, but we're not going to rest on the laurels. We're going to continue to grind away. I'm in creative meetings this week with the whole team, which is not just me and Scott, with Sanjay Dutt, Jimmy Jacobs, Abyss. I mean, we're all part of the team that puts these things together, that gets the stuff out there. So happy that you enjoyed Redemption, and we're looking to build on that success as we roll towards Slammiversary, which I'm just super pumped about.
Hi, Don. Hi, Don. This is Raj with Wrestling Inc. How are you doing today?
Hey, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. It came out today that no charges will be filed against Enzo Amore, and the Phoenix Police Department has closed that case. Could you see Impact being open to working with him in the future?
This is news to me, and I didn't know that. I haven't, frankly, followed any of that. It's not to say that I wasn't aware of that story that's been out there, but I guess you say kind of, never say never. And, you evaluate talent based on need and what you're looking to do. I think, we have a long-term plan for how we engage with talent in terms of, who's going to be on the roster, what roster spots we need filled, et cetera. It's not as much of a random thing. So, as with any other talent, I think, time will tell.
Great. Thanks.
Don, that seems like a perfect segue to an email question from Warrior G, who asked, what are the company goals for the next year and for the next 2 years?
Well, I think, I don't want to, be trite about using the word cool, but, I think that I certainly would like to see us being thought of as a destination wrestling promotion for talent and for fans and customers. Part of that is the cool factor. I think we have made some strides in that area, but I would like to see us working with more partners, being more open. I would like to see us, from a corporate standpoint, doing our jobs to position both the company and the talent that drive a lot of the interest, to position those things in a way that makes Impact Wrestling, like New Japan has been arguably for the last 3 years. We would like to be that cool company, that company that everyone's talking about. And I think the people that go for this ride with us are going to be pleasantly surprised at what the outcome is going to be.
Hey, this is Riju from Sportskida again. My question is, what happened with Alberto El Patron that led to the Redemption main event being changed?
I think a lot of that has kind of been covered. I don't have anything new to add to that. Certainly, we wish Alberto all the best in the stuff that he's doing and with his life. And you know, the situation has been kind of widely reported and covered. I don't really have anything else to add to it.
Hi, it's Chris from Big Missouri again. Eagle Eye viewers would have seen Sugar Dunkerton on the latest episode of Impact. What do you think of Sugar as a talent, and can you give us an update on his position in the company?
And sorry, I don't know if it's the connection or it's on my end, but I literally didn't hear any of that. Ross, can you help me out?
No, I heard the question, but it was very garbled at my end too. Could you repeat the question once more?
Okay, I said Eagle Eye viewers would have seen Sugar Dunkerton on the latest episode of Impact. What do you think of him as a talent? Could you give us an update on his position in the company?
Ross, I'm not getting who the talent was.
You know, I apologize because I can't hear the name of the talent you're mentioning.
It's really
Sugar Dunkerton.
What's the name?
Sugar Dunkerton.
Yeah.
You know, I think I've seen him wrestle once. You know, he's as I recall, it was a long time ago, back in January. I think he's a charismatic guy. You know, and I think that the fact that there are talents out there that are interested in being on Impact Wrestling is a kind of a commentary on how the management team is and the talent that works with us, where we're taking this company, that there are talents like that out there who make us a destination for where they'd like to work.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Don, this is Azik Fir from Eagle Total Israel.
Hey, man.
Hey. We talked about, you've been talking about Redemption earlier, and we saw at Redemption the debut of Tessa Blanchard and the comeback of DJZ. What are your expectations from those two talents in the near future eventually at Impact?
I think start with DJZ. I mean, I think what a great young guy, and you know, a tremendous talent, great athlete, and obviously has his own very heart-wrenching kind of story to tell. And you know, this has been kind of a redemption year for him as well, I think. And he looks to be better than 100%, and a guy who I think has the potential to be someone that, you know, young people that watch our show get real excited about. So I think he's definitely got a real coolness about him. Tessa Blanchard, I would just say, I mean, she's just a phenomenal talent. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. At her age, to be as advanced and polished as she is, to have the edge and the fifth gear that she does is really not a typical thing necessarily in wrestling. It's kind of like that package. She calls herself a total package. I mean, she really is. I mean, she's smart. She's beautiful. She's dangerous. She's a phenomenal wrestler. She looks like a star. She carries herself like a star. And I guess, you know, none of that should surprise us, given who her dad and her stepdad are. And she would have been taught by some of the best. So I think that, you know, she's someone who has the ability to really get fans excited, and for real good reason. She's excellent.
Great, man. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Fini again, Postil Magazine again. My question was about we'll just talk about Tessa Blanchard, and you currently have in the roster three very interesting talents in Taya, Brian Cage, and Tessa Blanchard, who are really used to doing intergender matches. Is it something you could imagine put on the show?
I mean, I guess I would just say, and I don't mean this to be a cop-out, it's not something that any of us have spent a lot of time thinking about. So I know that's not maybe the most in-depth answer that you would have liked, but it's not something that we've spent a lot of time thinking about, and not something that I think you should expect to see anytime soon.
Or something more hardcore?
Pardon?
Or hardcore things like the barbed wire massacre or things like that.
I mean, we've certainly had some of that. I mean, with Abyss, and then even what Callahan did to me in Toronto in the footage we showed, which was, was fairly intense. So it's, I've never been, I never liked wrestling shows where you had nothing but one thing, whether it was flying or hardcore or whatever. I think there's a balance and there's a mix. So, we'll continue to listen to our fans about what they'd like to see, and within reason, try to deliver that.
Hey, Ritu from Sportskeeda again. My question is, what are the plans for the Grand Championship in the future? It does not seem to be a very active title at the moment.
I think to be determined, but, I think that if you watch our show, some new belts, the new world title, new X Division title, new Knockouts title, new tag team titles. And so that may give you an indication of where the kind of priorities lay. I've never been a fan of wrestling companies that had, too many belts. And so I think that, the less overages you have in terms of too many titles, the more your titles you do focus on means. So we'll probably stick with that philosophy in terms of any championships outside the ones I mentioned.
Hi, Don. This is Raj with WrestlingInc.com again.
Yep.
I just wanted to get your thoughts on where you see Impact Wrestling going short term, and where you'd like it to be in 5 years.
Short term, I think we will continue with the plan that we have made. Continue executing the plan to move the company forward. I think 5 years from now, we'd like to talk about a company that has grown exponentially in terms of revenue, and in terms of a talent roster.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Ryan Bowman from thegorillaposition.com again. You guys have really experimented with the look of the show, with even your backstage segments have been shot differently and from unique camera angles. What kind of balance do you strike on your own schedule as far as the wrestling side of things and the actual production side of things? And are there any other visual changes we can keep an eye out for coming up?
Yeah, I think that, we're always looking to improve the product. I think that if you look at, Slammiversary coming up, which I am so pumped about, Sunday, July 22nd in Toronto at the Rebel Entertainment Complex, I think, you're going to get a very different look and a different feel that I think people will have to experience, and they're going to have a ball with that. So I think, we're like with every part of this company, we're always looking to make improvements. So production is just one of those areas.
Hi, Don Lewis here again from the Tap Out Wrestling Podcast Network. Quick question. I was wondering, what are the plans for the Desi Hit Squad, and when are we going to see the remaining members of them show up in the Impact Zone?
I actually received an email from Gama Singh, the great Gama, yesterday. And so I think that's something a lot of people have been asking about. And Gama is a well-known national legend in wrestling. and especially in overseas markets, India, South Africa, Japan. So Gama has been, he lives in Calgary, as many people know, pardon me, and, obviously a legend of Stampede Wrestling. So he has been training some of the Desi Hit Squad crew, and some of those crew are, have not been seen yet, in terms of getting them ready for what they're going to do in Impact. So to answer your question, I think you should be seeing Gama and the Desi Hit Squad featured sometime fairly soon.
Very good. Thank you, Don.
Hey, Don, we can go to an email question. She writes in wanting to know your thoughts about the Knockouts division as it stands now. People such as Taya, Sienna, Allie, and Rosemary have been around, and relative newcomers Tessa, Sue Young, Kiera Hogan, and Madison Rain returning this Knockouts division right now versus past Knockouts divisions.
Interesting. I mean, it's hard for me to say that simply because I saw the Knockouts when I was here in 0304. So I don't know how to kind of compare it. I know that, we have Gail Kim, who's a legendary performer, one of the greatest performers in the business at one point, I think. And so I'll leave those kind of questions for comparison to Gail. But one of the reasons I think Gail is here and has stuck around after stopping being an in-ring performer has been to add knowledge and coach up some of our knockouts in terms of level where we hopefully exceed anything that's even ever happened in the knockouts division. And let's face it, that's a high bar, because I think that the knockouts in the former TNA wrestling very much set the stage for women's wrestling and set the standard. So we're looking forward to living up to those expectations.
Stephanie for Searcher Magazine again. Was not going to make you speak French again.
Merci beaucoup.
What was my when before I found back my question, when are we going to have the chance to see Impact again in France, because we don't have that chance and we miss it a lot. And do you think one of the parts of the rebuilding, the key of the success of this rebuilding, can come from the fact the talents are not fully Impact? When I say that, I'm saying the wrestlers are not wrestling 100% for the company, and the fact they can wrestle everywhere in the world and every company they want. This fact can be a key for you to gain more momentum and help rebuild the company, because when people are seeing them elsewhere, they can come to see them after on the show. Merci encore.
I think that strategy of, folks being able to, talents being able to work where they need to, where they want to being able to get that exposure for themselves and to be exposed to fans in other markets, even if it's not always for Impact Wrestling, is part of that partnership with talent that we've been talking about for 4 months or more now. So, certainly if that policy takes us to markets like France, then I think that's wonderful. And, France is certainly one of my favorite countries to go to, as it is for a lot of folks. And I know that they've got some very knowledgeable wrestling fans. So that's certainly part of the plan. I mean, part of the issue too for us. I mean, we're pretty lean, and as Ross knows, I mean, it's, you can't be everywhere. And sometimes you got to take one step at a time. And I've been preaching, as Scott has and Ed has, we've all been preaching patience to let this thing unfold. So to answer the question, I mean, I think that eventually we'd love to be doing more in France, as we would a lot of markets, because we want to get out and see the fans and expose them to our product.
I'll be waiting patiently.
Well, Don, with that, we will wrap up this week's teleconference. I appreciate your time very much, and why don't you take us home with a final thought, and what's your final thought heading into Impact tomorrow night, Windsor in a couple weeks, and Slammiversary on July 22nd?
I'm super excited for June 1st and 2nd to be back in Windsor, Ontario, one of my favorite cities and the best wrestling fans in the world, for two big shows at St. Clair College. It's going to be wonderful to be here, and some of the the top talent in the world, Wrestling for Impact Wrestling, coming back to Windsor. Super pumped about that, as I am about being in Toronto for Slammiversary, my first Slammiversary ever, Sunday, July 22nd at the Rebel Entertainment Complex, and that thing has to be seen to be believed. I'm super pumped about that, being in one of the greatest cities in the world, Toronto, Ontario. And then I've got my DVR set and ready to watch it live. Actually, going to have a little viewing party at my house, I hope, tomorrow night for Impact on Pop, Fight Network in Canada. We've got a street fight between Eddie Edwards and the much-talked-about Sami Callihan, courtesy of House of Hardcore. Obviously, the decision was made last week by us in the management committee that any further violence and interactions between Sami and Eddie would need to happen outside the purview of Impact Wrestling. So very quickly, as you can imagine, promotions all over the world wanted to sign those guys to bring their unique brand of their blood feud, if you will, and House of Hardcore was able to secure that. So we're going to have that footage for you tomorrow night on Pop, as well as a phenomenal tag match at the end. Great main event between Phantasm and Pentagon against Matt Sydal and Austin Aries. And I think that tag team of Austin Aries and Matt Sydal is, with a little time, could probably win tag belts all over the world. Those guys are great talent. So I'm just super pumped for the show tomorrow night. Like I said, going to have some friends over, check it out. I like to watch it live simply because, although obviously I'm involved in the product and whatnot, you like to see it unfold as a 2-hour show. So super pumped about that, and encourage everyone to check us out. Download the GWN app, subscribe. Lots of great matches on there, not just my match with Eric Watts from 2004 where I won control of the company. There's some actual great wrestling on there besides me walking and talking. So encourage people to do that. Check us out on Twitch. Check us out at our .com site. Check us out on Facebook. Just check us out. And we're doing this for the fans, and it's been great to be able to talk to some of the media today.
All righty, Don. Appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you a couple weeks in Windsor, and media, we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys.